Hey, what's up everyone? I'm Austin. If you're new here, it's great to meet you. Welcome to my channel. I'm a current medical student and I provide valuable advice and tips for all of you along your medical journey. So if that's something you're interested in, please subscribe to my channel. That'd really help me out. Today's video, we're going to be talking about the works and activities section of your medical school application. So this section can be kind of tricky for students. We're really going to break down how to go through it, the best descriptions, and what to write for each one. So you want to stay tuned for that. In my previous two videos on the medical school admissions process, we talked about the personal statement and letters of recommendation. So today's work and activity sections will be wrapping up the whole information you kind of need before you send your application in, and then my next series we're going to be working on things that go in after you submit your application. So June 1st is coming up, or is it May 31st now? One of the two is the date when you can first submit your application to AMCAS, AACOMAS, or TMDSAS. So keep an eye out for that, because the earlier you submit will be the most advantageous for you. But the next series we'll be looking at more of those secondary essays, interview prep for the fall, and things that come after you submit. So hopefully your personal statements are all ready to go, you got all your letters of recommendation, and your works and activities are starting to come together, and I hope this video is helpful for that. If you haven't seen the other two videos yet, I'll put them up here and you can check those out, and I recommend that for especially the personal statement, because that's a really important piece of your application. So before we get into all the fun stuff with the experiences and works and activities, let's go through the nitty-gritty and explain the differences between the three application processes. So we'll start with AMCAS. AMCAS is for MD medical schools, and they allow you 15 works and activities with 700 characters for each of those activities, and you can select 3 of those activities to be your most meaningful activities, where you get an additional 1325 characters to discuss that activity. We'll talk about more what to write in those sections when we get there in this video, but I just wanted to give you a quick overview on the AMCAS application. The AACOMAS application is for DO medical schools, and this program also gives you 15 activities to include, but you don't have any most meaningfuls, and you only have 600 characters to discuss those. Now, for all of you interested in applying via TMDSAS for all your public MD and DO Texas medical schools, then you actually get unlimited works and activities to talk about, but just 300 characters for each of those, and you still get 3 most meaningfuls now in 2020 for the TMDSAS, but you only get 500 characters to talk about those. So you have to be a little bit more concise for those ones. In this video, we're going to be talking more towards the AMCAS and AACOMAS applications when we talk about descriptions, but these are still applicable to the TMDSAS. And if any of you have specific questions with the TMDSAS application, please feel free to reach out to me via Facebook, YouTube, or whatever, and I'll be happy to help you, because I have a few friends that went to TMDSAS and did that route. With that being said, let's go ahead and start today's video and talk about the works and activities section. I'm looking forward to it. Let's do it. So probably the number one question that I get about the works and activities section is, Austin, how many activities should I have? And honestly, there's no right answer for that, because it's quality over quantity, and everyone's application is different. So when you get to the works and activities section, I think it's quite simple, because at this point you can't really fabricate anything, so you really just include what you did, and you can talk a little bit about it, why it's important to you, but again, you don't have too many characters, just 700 for your normal activities, and then additional 1325 for those most meaningfuls, which we'll get more towards the end of this video. So pretty much you're going to input the activity, find the relevant category it falls under, whether it's volunteering, non-clinical volunteering, clinical, or community service, things like that, research, and then you just include that. You put a point of contact and then the amount of hours that you did in that role or whatever the experience is. For roles that you'll be continuing to do during your 1-year application process, you can project hours, and that's just using your best estimate, which brings it to my next point, and that's just to not overinflate your hours. Be as honest as you can. Admissions committees, they know when you're trying to pump up those hours, and it just doesn't look good, and it looks dishonest, and it's not something you want to portray as a medical school applicant. Actually, one of the schools I applied to, I was told that they actually have a system where they kind of put all your activities and the hours you put into like a machine that kind of calculates, if it's even possible, the amount of hours you put. So that kind of weeds out those kids that kind of just round everything up and jack up those hours. So yes, be honest, and that's what my advice would be for the number and quality of activities. Though I would add that you should show some demonstrated interest in the field of medicine. So when you're choosing your activities, there's a lot of flexibility because you're doing different things and everyone's a unique applicant. But you should have some type of hospital volunteering, some hospital shadowing, and then probably some research experience. What I would recommend. Those three things is because it shows your interest in the field of medicine and you've tried those different things. So if you don't have like volunteering, shadowing, or research, I wouldn't freak out because it doesn't completely exclude you from medical school, but you should have a reason why you didn't pursue those things and be ready to answer that in interviews because they will ask you about that, and I think that's something you all should prepare for. Okay, so when you're describing your experiences, it's really important not to be wordy and to be clear and concise. After all, you're very limited in the amount of characters that you have. You want to make the best use of all of them. So here's my simple blueprint and my trick/secret to the description section of your medical school application. And that is simple. It's the first sentence. I think you start broad. You explain the organization, the activity, the club, their experience, whatever it is. Next sentence or two, you talk about your role in the experience. So how did that role start? How did that role develop? And just give us a general overview of what you did and what your role was in that experience. And then finally, the last one, I would say, give a sentence, just a one-liner about, what the experience meant to you or what you got out of it, your goal in participating, something like that really helps you connect to the reader. I think that last step is really what students miss out on, and it's good use of your characters. You really connect more with the reader and it lets the reader know why you did the experience that you did. And I'm actually going to go and show you guys an example from my own AMCAS application about an activity that I participated in and included in my application. I talked about this a little bit in other videos, but in college I taught health education to students in Chicago public schools. So I talked about that in my experiences, and here's my example on my AMCAS application, and I will show you exactly how I used the blueprint that I just mentioned. Alright, so here I have a little snippet of my application for this experience pulled up, and you can clearly see I'm doing exactly what I taught you guys in that blueprint. First sentence, PHE's goal is to empower young people to make wise choices surrounding their health. So that's my overview statement about what the organization is, what it's about, and then now I go into my role. As an educator, it's our responsibility to equip students with the knowledge, resources, and skills to lead holistically healthy lives. I started my first year as a health educator who taught weekly, blah blah blah, and then I explained that as a senior health educator, which is what I am when I was applying, I continued to teach weekly, but I also mentored the new health educators and provide them with tools and skills to teach effectively. Finally, that last one-liner statement I mentioned, it's through my involvement in bonds with the students, I strive to educate and mold a better future for them. It's just one line. I think it's a great use of characters, and sure, it might not seem like much, but anytime you're writing something in your application, that's an opportunity for you to share a little more about your personality, your character, and just your drive, what makes you tick. And trust me that these readers of your application, they read it pretty closely, and if you can just give any indication of your character a little bit more, then that's going to help you get an interview and hopefully also an acceptance later down the road. So in each of these little activity sections, how many 10 or 15 activities you might have, you can use that last sentence to kind of just connect with the reader a little bit more. It just shows why the experience is important to you in general. Alright, so now we're going to be talking about the most meaningful activities. So this is only going to be applicable to the TMDSAS and AMCAS because both of these allow you to choose 3 additional experiences as your most meaningful. So in AMCAS you get an extra 1325 characters to discuss these, and in TMDSAS you get 500 characters. I'm mostly going to be gearing this towards AMCAS because most students will apply via AMCAS. So if you're doing TMDSAS, again, just reach out to me personally and we can talk a little bit more about that on your application. But with AMCAS, I would treat each of these most meaningful activities as like a mini personal statement. If you watch my video on the personal statement, you'll know that in the body paragraphs of the personal statement, I talk about you should, include experiences that showed your growth towards becoming a physician and how you grew from those experiences and what, kind of impacted you to want to get closer to the goal of becoming a physician. And I think these, most meaningful activities are like mini personal statements where you're going to be sharing another experience, but instead of that experience being directly geared towards why you want to be a physician, they're actually going to be more about different, traits you can share about yourself, such as your leadership skills, personal relations, communication skills, all skills that are really important to your future position as a physician in the field of medicine. So in the most meaningful activity section, you'll have the same 700 characters where you can provide a description in that simple blueprint that we talked about earlier, so that's the same thing. And your additional 1325 characters, now this is where you get to tell a story. Now say it again, it's like a mini personal statement. So it's like one of those paragraphs where you finally get to go in and describe more about why this activity was so meaningful to you. Explain who you got to impact, and then most importantly, how it impacted you and how you grew from it. So when you're choosing your most meaningful activities, I think you should stick to those basic traits and characteristics that you really want to portray to the admissions committees. So the best way for me to explain this is to tell you about my own application process. And like I mentioned earlier, think of things like leadership skills or communication or problem solving. So one of my most meaningful activities that I talked about was how I was the president of my honors college advisory board. So this was kind of a committee where I worked with faculty and the student body to communicate different types of change and build, student camaraderie on campus. So I talked about how that helped develop my communication skills, as I had to become a better listener when I, talked to my student body and heard about the feedback that they had and how that helped me communicate to the faculty. So overall, I worked through that experience and showed my growth as a leader and as a listener, and communication-wise, how that could be applicable to listening to my patients in the future. Another experience I talked about as my most meaningful was actually my research experience, and that was because I think it really helped me develop problem-solving skills. So you kind of see the point here, talk about an experience, how it impacted other people, and then also how that impacted you, and I think you'll be at a great spot in your most meaningful activities and the entire activities and work section as a whole. Okay, so those are my tips, advice, and secrets to the whole works and activities section. So thank you guys for tuning in. If you have any questions about this stuff, comment below on my YouTube channel, or you can join my Facebook group. I'll put it right here. Well, it won't be here, it'll be like a picture, but you can press the link in my description. Join that Facebook group, reach out to me via message. I'm pretty responsive, and I've been interacting with a lot of you this past month, and it's just been really great, and I appreciate all of you letting me read your personal statements and give you feedback and help you out in this application process. So best of luck to all of you. Keep it up. If you're not applying yet right now, I hope that these videos can be helpful for you in your journey. Best of luck. Subscribe to my channel if you haven't already. That would be great, and I hope to see you and interact with all of you more going forward. Have a great day.